Issues in Education is a national thought leadership platform. Listen as Dr. Jim Rosborg, Director of Masters in Education, McKendree University, Dr. Robert Daiber, Regional Superintendent, Madison County, Illinois, and Dennis Young, President and CEO of Ittner Architects, discuss teacher shortages. Dr. Rosborg, how is the teacher shortage across the nation impacting our schools here? Are you having a hard time attracting qualified teachers to get into the classroom?
Well, this is a huge problem. I'm getting calls every day from superintendents just begging for ideas of how they can find candidates, especially in math and science and likewise in industrial arts. That is a big time problem. And ironically, we're starting to see one I never thought I would see, is PE.
Really?
And I think what happened that goes back to the No Child Left Behind Act, which was great on its emphasis of math and reading. No one can argue that component. But in that process, we saw vocational programs get underfunded, and we saw less of an emphasis on PE and fine and practical art programs. And so now we are suffering the consequences. Vocational, you've even heard major political leaders in this country talk about how we need to focus more on vocational education. Well, that somewhat was created by our government. And my bias here, and I'll say it's my bias, is a lot of our teacher shortage today was created by rules established at the state board and legislative levels, thinking that they were doing the right thing by lessening the candidates in the pool, but in the process have created a huge, huge problem. As a retired school superintendent, I said at the time, and I was considered an obstructionist on this at the time, that I would always rather have 24 candidates and pick out the best one as opposed to one or two or none. And so what we've gone is from the 24 candidates for position to the one or two or none, and that's a huge problem. I would like to just talk about one other specifics. In math in Illinois last year, we had 305 individuals take the content area test in math to teach it. In science, we had 375 we had in science to be able to teach it. That is woefully short on the needs throughout the state of Illinois on candidates to fill candidates in those positions. And so what you're having, and I'm going to let Bob Daiber talk more on this in regards to the regional superintendent survey, but what you're having is some school districts now aren't able to even offer upper level math classes and upper level science classes at the high school level so that they're prepared to go to college.
Dr. Daiber, I think we look for reasons why. Is it salary and resources? Is it the testing requirements? Is it the leadership in the districts? What are you hearing?
I would have to say it was all that you mentioned plus one, and that's changes in the retirement system in the state of Illinois, and individuals scared to go into education because what they hear about the future of it. We also had just a lot of controversy in Illinois about how teacher licensure was issued, and so in 2016. The regional superintendents did this teacher shortage survey, and we found some real significant data from that as to where we had shortfalls. And we were successful this past year to pass really some landmark legislation in Illinois that we believe is going to help, and it gives direct reciprocity to out-of-state candidates coming into Illinois to teach that never before could happen. So if you have a license in Missouri, or you have a license in Indiana, Wisconsin, Kentucky, or anywhere in the United States, and you're an active teacher, you can transfer that license now into Illinois and become a teacher. Prior to this legislation, you couldn't do that. You had to fulfill the course requirement. You had to pass the teacher competency test, which is the TAP test in Illinois, and the content test. So testing was a major factor to attract out-of-state teachers and out-of-state administrators that I work with. So we hope that this legislation that was passed this past year helps to bring about some relief to the teacher shortage. But more than anything, it's to advocate to young people that teaching is a dynamic field to go into. It has great rewards beyond monetary compensation that you receive, and monetary compensation is a major factor when you're making a tremendous investment into a four-year education. And as you well know from reports, that many college graduates are graduating with a college debt of $50,000 to $100,000. So to go into a field that pays $35,000 to $40,000 may not be their choice.
I'd like to piggyback a little bit on that too, in that a huge problem in Illinois, and statistically we know this is true, has been the change in the teacher basic skills test that took place in 2010. And that's, as Bob said, called the TAP test, the test of academic proficiency. And so right now the passage rate on that test over this past year has ranged between 18% and 23% to even get in the field of education. And these are individuals that ranked high in their high school, but yet have gone to college and they can't get into education because of the basic skills test. Now, Illinois did make an adjustment for a 22 average on the ACT and the comparable on the SAT, but it's still a huge problem, and it's my personal feeling that until Illinois looks at that issue, Illinois will continue to have a lack of candidates going into the field of education. And when you compare Missouri's retirement age to Illinois' is at 67, and Missouri still is in the mid-50s. People just aren't going into education, and you actually have teachers in Illinois telling students not to go to universities in Illinois because now they can fulfill that basic skills requirement and out of state, come back directly and teach in Illinois and not have to deal with that bureaucratic dilemma.
Some states have moved to ease the teaching requirements so that it would allow someone who has 5 years of experience or someone with a close degree to come into the classroom and teach. What are the pros and cons to that approach?
I'll talk about the pros. The one thing, sometimes you get an individual who has a real rich subject matter area and lets use science. So you've got maybe a retired chemist, or you have a person who was a chemist that decides they no longer want to work for a corporation and they're going to go to a school and they're going to teach, which, you know, they are rich in content, but maybe weak in methodology because they didn't realize that not everybody might want to learn chemistry every day. Imagine that. And the same may be in any other field. You may have an accountant that decides that they would like to teach, and they come in so they teach math. And the list can go on subject matter-wise. The key that anyone who considers going into the field of education has to really take into account is that in every classroom you've got 20 to 30 different personalities. You have 20 to 30 different individuals who have different learning modalities as to how they're going to grasp the content, and the key of being an effective teacher is the way in which you can present and connect with all kids in your class. And that is exactly what you learn when you have courses in teaching methodologies, in childhood psychology, learning and development, etc. And I encourage and I work with individuals who are coming in Illinois that receive a provisional teaching certificate and encourage them to get some foundations in education at our universities so that they are better prepared as a teacher in the classroom.
I feel in some areas, for example, our situation in vocational education is so bad in Illinois right now that if you can have an individual that is strong in industrial technology, industrial arts, that doesn't necessarily have, quote, a teaching degree, then I would be for that. But as far as the general classroom, no, I am not against it because there's so much more technique and needed to be a successful teacher in the classroom. And the thing that we have forgotten is that we need individuals in the classroom, especially in the elementary classroom, that love children and can relate to children and are going to get those children excited about the educational process. And that takes a large degree of training. Everybody said, I've always said every job's easy till you do it. But if you get really down and talk to individuals that are not in education, there are literally some people that are skilled in business and industry that would be scared to death to walk in that classroom with 30 children in that classroom, ranging in reading ability with about 5 different grade levels in reading ability, or even those learners that do not have the ability in reading and math. Do you have the patience to work with that? One of the travesties we've already done in education is making it so that it's more academic oriented as opposed to that common sense. Some of my very best teachers when I was superintendent of schools were those teachers that struggled a little bit in school themselves because they could relate to those kids that were struggling in school, and they brought the best out of those kids. And I'm not saying all, because some of my best teachers were very academic oriented, but some of the ones that got straight A's in college, they struggled a little bit with that slow learner, and it became very frustrating for them in the classroom because for them education was easy, and so it was hard for them to adapt. So to say carte blanche, no, but there does need to be that, as far as keeping it totally out, but there does need to be a way for those individuals to have training of how to relate with students in that classroom.
And this deals with school building management. Working in a business is altogether different than working in a school. School has a particular culture, and there are, let's say, particular etiquettes in a school that you don't do that you may do in business, and we're discussing conveying, let's say, professional learning here also, just in your relationship on the nature of the conversations that you have with students, the type of language that you may use that you're not used to using with kids, the way that you approach a person in the hallway or in the cafeteria, and so being a teacher, enjoy eating with 300 kids in the cafeteria and listen to what they got to say too. So when I talk about a school culture, sometimes it's almost a cultural shock when you bring someone into a school today that hasn't been there in a while, and maybe they went to a smaller school and they come into one of our I think of a high school that's got 1,200, 2,000 students in. They see these massive movements of people, and they seem like they know everywhere they're going, and they're like, wow, I had no idea that this is what it was.
Thank you for listening to Issues in Education. Please visit our Knowledge Library for access to other national leaders.